From the Institute of International Studies, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this very special Czech semester event. In planning one of these themed semesters, people are always most interested in cooking demonstrations, and more specifically, the opportunity to sample food from the country that we're emphasizing. And I was very pleased to find a Czech-born chef in Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa, about 7 hours from here. This is Tomas Slepicka, born in Brno, the second largest city in the Czech Republic, behind only Prague. And he has, I think, a very interesting story that I'll just relate briefly to you. He began cooking as a child, and by age 10 was baking cakes and Christmas cookies. Then he started focusing on meals. With restaurants and catering being common in the Czech Republic, he earned a degree from a culinary school in his hometown of Brno. While still in school, he established a successful full-service catering company, which operated in the Czech and Slovak republics plus Austria. In 2008, he changed directions completely, creating a language school in Brno with his brother and someone named Maggie Grove from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And this is Maggie. You probably know how this story is going to end up. So she had gone to Brno to teach high school. They got married, decided to move back to Cedar Rapids, Iowa to raise their children. More and better educational opportunities, I guess, in Cedar Rapids than in Brno. So.
Yeah, high school and elementary school.
Okay.
Universities are fine.
The chef currently teaches online cooking classes in cooperation with the National Czech and Slovak Museum and Library in Cedar Rapids. He's also branching out with his blog, cookingwithfamily.com. So this is the first of 3 appearances he's making. Tomorrow night, he'll be downtown Joplin as part of Third Thursday with more sandwiches for the public to sample. And then again on Friday, he'll be back in here at 12 noon talking about not all goulashes are the same, why the Czech version is special. Be sure to stick around following today's talk because he has prepared 140 miniature sandwiches for you to sample. So we're probably limited to one sample each, maybe 2 if some people leave. But I think that will be another highlight of the presentation today, getting to actually taste what the chef has prepared. So please join me in welcoming Chef Tomas Slepicka.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Chet, for great introduction. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm always excited about any opportunity to promote my country's culture. And as everyone or most people would at least agree with me, food, it's the most accessible way how to present any culture because people don't necessarily need to go to certain depth of history or anything, but everyone is usually excited to learn about something which is edible and typical for a country. So Chet already said enough about me, so this presentation will be about everything else. I am originally from Czech Republic, Brno, and I don't know if there's a laser on it, but it's right here. It's in Moravia, a little bit of geographic. Everyone, I believe, at some point heard about Prague. Brno, it's the 2nd largest city of the country, and it's a capital of Moravia. In old times, Moravia and Bohemia were different countries, but eventually it got all together. And Prague is bigger, so Prague won the capital city battle. But Brno, if you look online, it's roughly, some researchers said 380,000, some say 600,000. It depends how you look at it, I guess. There's a lot of universities and others. So for European measurement, it's relatively a big city. For American measurements, it's a tiny city. Why I show the map, it's to put it to the context in terms of food. We have we are surrounded by Austria, Germany, Poland, and Slovakia. And as it's very common with any cuisine, Czech cuisine is influenced by the countries, by the surrounding countries' cuisine, and also influencing them back. So there's, in a way, exchange of the recipes and cooking techniques, and it's over the time the countries took over and over the recipes and concerned their own. So this is how it literally happened. And of course, the farther on countries influence Czech cuisine as well. As you will see very soon, Czech cuisine is rich on all kind of sauces which are common in the French cuisine. There is some pasta meals influenced by Italy. And if we go very much farther than in Europe, everyone heard about, I would say most of you at least heard about the Czech dumpling. And when we talk about dumpling, it obviously sounds like something Asian, right? It's about 7th century, dumplings get to the Europe, and they start modifying that European countries, and soon after then, the dumpling became the Czech version of dumpling became considered a Czech meal. So even much farther countries, not just the surrounding one, had a very big impact to it. And also it's kind of vice versa. It's influenced the countries back, and everything's eventually connect. We will talk about it a little more. And this is a very nice example. I put purposely Czech names because I can say English for you. And this is řízek s bramborovým salátem. So it sounds maybe too complicated in Czech, but it's a schnitzel with a potato salad. And now you tell me, okay, schnitzel, that sounds German. Yes, in a way it is. But when we go back, and this is a very nice example how the food recipes and techniques traveled. In 19th century, there was some war in Italy, with Austrian-Hungarian Empire was involved, and one of the generals eating, I forgot the town, but it was some Italian town, and had a back version of chicken parmesan, right? Italian herbs, parmesan in the breading, and he loved it. He told about it Austrian-Hungarian Empire when he came back, and he ordered his head chef to redevelop this recipe so they can replicate it. And back then there were no Costco's or Amazon, of course, so people have to use what they have. So they cut certain seasoning, they cut off the parmesan because for some reason it wasn't easily accessible, and they created a version of the schnitzel in Vienna, Austria. And obviously back then current Czech Republic was part of Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and it's kind of spread out. And by beginning of 20th century, everyone cooked the Vienna version of the schnitzel, create little changes. As I will tell you probably a couple more times today, most Czech recipes include garlic or onion, at least one, or preferably both. That's kind of a typical vegetable. So Czechs put some garlicky elements to it. And since early 20th centuries, they consider that their own meal. So we kind of see that journey from the Italy through Vienna all the way to Czech Republic. And we can go on and on. We won't, because this is just kind of a good idea to start. So I already talked about Brno, about, I would say, average half million people, roughly. So first mention about Czech cuisine, it's in 20th century. And back then, people used to like cooking on the open fire, all sorts of stew. It was very simple. Obviously, back then, people live short life, and if they don't die starving, that was kind of what they were focusing on it. Obviously, people who were wealthier try to experiment and use some herbs and start became more focused in order to get more flavor from food. And that's when it started developing. And the 12th century, it's when the Czech cuisine start define itself. First recipe from the Czech Republic, a bit from current Czech Republic, goes back to the 15th century, when it was actually written on the paper, not just shown somewhere or shared, but actually really written in a way like our current recipes. And then the biggest revolution in Czech cooking, or in defining Czech cooking, was in 1826, when Magdalena Dobromira Retigová, who was half German and half Czech, she was actually, she was literally half, but she was considered herself more Czech. She wrote, she first had to learn Czech because they moved to Czech with her husband, and then she wrote a first ever cookbook. And it was a cookbook which really defined Czech cooking. If most of us take that cookbook now, including me, the recipes are written different way. They expect everyone who take it be 100% skilled, not just in cooking, but in cooking that era in a way. So the directions are very short, straightforward, and from current perspective, maybe confusing, somebody would say maybe weird, but the recipes really set base for the earthy, traditional Czech kitchen and really define the basis. So she was very important. I actually looked last night online and they said every Czech household has the cookbook at home. I don't. Okay, I studied that in the past. I had it from library. I don't think it's a to-go cookbook, which you just go when you don't know what to cook on Sunday, but it's a good base ground. Things changed, perception changed. People back then use more intestines, more part of the meat, which we don't usually use in this era. They used to utilize the whole animal. So there are recipes which some of them sounds crazy, but there are also recipes which some of them really set up what defines Czech cuisine, such as, for example, you already saw the goulash, the stew on the open fire. That's pretty much the first versions of the goulash, and she just defined it more. Then she defined it all kind of saucy meal, which we will be talking about. So she really set up the standard, and since then, more cookbooks start slowly coming, and Czech cuisine start being more and more defined and having very set up character. And from then, it's even blew more. So we already talked a little bit about dumplings. On the right side, if I start this way, right here, we have a side dumplings. Chet already mentioned that we have another presentation when we will talk about it on Friday. So you are all welcome to come and participate on that, which will be followed by tasting. And we will don't taste just the side dumplings. I'm going to prepare a goulash as well, so everyone can try. And since I eat everything because I feel I don't have a choice in a way, and I like everything too, to be fair. But Czech cuisine, it's very rich on vegetarian recipes. So I will also have a vegetarian version of this goulash. Same like today, I have some vegetarian sandwiches if you don't eat meat. Vegan cuisine in Czech Republic, it's very difficult. I mean, in traditional Czech recipes, it's difficult. So I will just leave it for today. So what we have here, the side dumplings come in a loaf. You will see it more. And then it gets sliced and people get slices with their sauce. You will see it in actual meal very soon. And what I have on other side, that's how people utilize the dumpling if they have leftover. They do stir-fry dumplings with eggs and onion. That's a nothing fancy meal, but it makes sense. And that's actually coming back to the history when Czech people really had a hard time, right? We first have the Second World War impact, which went to the multiple shortages. Then communism didn't help, obviously. So there were like a lot of things. And before then, people were always, all my grandmas, great grandmas, always what they get, they have to use. There were no waste, no possibilities. So this is a great example, and there will be a couple more today, how Czech cuisine really works in a way. And let's talk about, I call that a Cadillac of the Czech cuisine. That's the best comparison, or best which I come up at least. This is a svíčková na smetaně. You see the side dumplings right there? And then there is a earthy but creamy sauce. This is kind of important to mention. We'll talk soon about goulash. There is no cream, but in this there is a cream, there is a root vegetable, it can have bacon incorporated, and under that sauce, purposely covered, it's a beef roast, which can be done from any kind of beef meat people can afford. The most famous, it's filet mignon, obviously, but not everyone is willing to spend that much money, and it's happened that it's often substituted with other kind of meats. But this is a meal, sorry, which I purposely show because it's considered one of the most fanciest traditional Czech meal. I have to really stress that after 2000, communism passed in '89, and after 2000, country was pretty much stabilized. And when I say stabilized, we start having all sorts of restaurants, which we are used to in the United States. So people start eating more exotically, and not everyone eating only Czech meal, same like not everyone in US eat only American meal, right? So, but if you want a traditional Czech meal, you go for this. And this is a perfect combination of earthy sauce, beef roast, dumplings. And as you see, there is also lemon, cranberries, and whipped cream. So it's absolutely perfect combination. And I was just telling my wife yesterday, I wish I can have sample from all this meal, which I'm going to show you, and I won't. But if you want to cook them or give them a shot, because most of them you cannot get in the United States easily, I have recipes on my blog. So you can really, if you like cooking and if you don't mind to spend some time, you can do it, okay? The next, it's kuřená paprice. That's pretty much, it's direct translation, paprika chicken. It's simpler meal significantly. There is no cranberries. There are no cranberries and lemon, but it's again a stewed chicken with a little bit of cream, side dumplings, and also the cream on the top, whipped cream. And again, you see dumplings. So this is another great example. Then we have our goulash, hovězí goulash. Beef goulash, very simple translation. With dumplings, that's what we are going to work on Friday, sorry. Oh, sorry, on Friday. And we also have, for those who prefer meatless version, also the vegetarian goulash. So, and next, and this is, I love talking about this meal. This is called vepřok knedlo zelo. When I talk with somebody about Czech cuisine, I often hear, oh, you are the Czech, so you eat only pork, dumplings, and sauerkraut. This is kind of, at least in Cedar Rapids, stereotype. And I love pork, dumplings, and sauerkraut for record. I really do. I think it's a good combination. It just makes sense, but it's not what I eat every day. I have probably, when I lived in Czech, I like all sorts of food, not just Czech food. And if I ate it once or twice a year, that was about it. So it's not like I have it 3 times a week, no matter what happened, but it's a delicious combination, and it's combined perfectly, this meaty flavor together with sauerkraut, which often people prepare at home, and also the dumplings, and there is a little bit like gravy on the top, and it just makes perfect sense. But it's, I would say, unfortunately, that's the meal which it's stereotyped often and projected to people. And I taught about 60 different classes for Czech Museum or Czech Cuisine until I finally taught how to make this meal happen, because I didn't want to start with a stereotype. And my goal first was to show people that there are other options too, even that this is a good one. And now we're coming to the other, a very festive meal. And this is roasted duck legs. Czech people love, and this is kind of made for some people, maybe not. Some people are used to it, or some people not. But we love the meat on the bones. We serve all fish with a head and tail in restaurants. it needs to be, of course, properly prepared. But, there is a little more in a way flexibility. And this is a nice example. We have a roasted duck leg with 2 kind of sauerkraut. And I don't know if picture will show it well, but there is a different kind of dumplings. Czech don't have just this bread, regular side dumpling available, but this is a potato version, which is smaller, similar starcher, more filling, potato-y tasting, but very delicious with this. And this is a other version of traditional fancy meal, which you would have in your wedding, in birthdays, maybe for somebody in their funeral. So this is if you want to check things, this is where you gonna go. And in a way, there's similarity with that pork sauerkraut dumpling, which we had previous slide. This is another version of dumpling. This is a filled dumpling with a smoked meat, bacon, and these are made with potatoes. They can be done different ways, and they are filled, and there is a little bit of sauerkraut, and these are more, I would say, I don't want to say more Asian-like looking, but in a way that they are individual portion, not sliced. That's maybe the similarity which I would compare them, that they are actually like, you get a few. This is a small portion with 3, but if somebody's hungry, they eat a dozen of them. And now we're coming to the couple of vegetarian meals. I already mentioned that there were a lot of difficulties in past for, not anymore, but in Czech countries after Second World War, there was a shortage of meat, and that's very important to mention. Czech people love meat. That's the first things to say. When I was in culinary school, I was taught that vegetarian meal, it's any meal which includes less than 15% of the meat. So those of you who are vegetarians would tell me that's not gonna fly with me, but that was just, if I said anything else, that would be wrong answer. So there will be fried cheese, which I will show you. If there was a fried cheese with ham inside, that was considered a vegetarian meal because you get a more cheese, right? But so Czech people like meat, but Czech people are also practical, and they didn't have a choice, and they had to become survivors. So they grow. People have their gardens, if they can, even in the bigger city. Even my family house, it's downtown pretty much, and we have a huge garden connected to it behind. So it's very common that people grow their own vegetable. And during a meat shortage, people in a way didn't have a choice. So back then, a communist government gave an order to create a menu which once a week, that was for kids' favorite, usually on Friday, there was a sweet meal like a main course. That's why people learn to eat something sweet. And there have to be originally 3, and then they cut it to 2 vegetarian meals a week. And it was a time with all these vegetarian meals were more developed even. They actually had tradition from Magdalena Dobromila Retigová time, which we talked earlier, but it even get more popular because simply people didn't have a choice. So people were willing to give up their meat and consider meat more like a treat until it get more accessible. I actually remember even in 80s when I was born, when you went to the butcher, and communism ended in 89, as most of you probably know, in general in Europe, 89, 90s. When you went to the butcher, you couldn't just select meat. They had what they had, and you have to wait in line. My grandma usually go like at 5 in the morning to stay in line to get at 7, and you get what you get. And if they sold out, they sold out. And obviously, people who corrupt the butcher, they get a better meat, right? More you corrupt butcher, better meat you get. That was actually the joke, because like back then, the butchers were only people who can afford to have a Mercedes and luxurious car, which didn't even sell in communist era because they had more money than anyone. So that was kind of, so people change, people adapt. And this is a mushroom sauce saved with mashed potatoes. It's earthy, there is no meat, which is fine for a vegetarian, maybe unusual for people who love meat, but if you try it, it makes sense. The next, it's a spinach with egg and mashed potatoes. And what I don't have here is all kind of different meals, such as creamy peas or all sorts of creamy beans and all sorts of kind of stir fry meals. And now we coming to the more modern era, more modern, we are still in a communism. And this is a stuffed pepper with a ground meat, which is usually, it could be beef, pork, or combination, usually both. And there is a tomato sauce. And we already talked a little bit about how the culture got influenced. This is a nice example because everyone, when you said tomato sauce, everyone's thinking about marinara, right? But this tomato sauce is different. There are no basil, no herbs, and it tastes sweet. There's actually sugar added. There is added some even a little bit of vinegar to even get a more acidity, more contrast. And it can be served with mashed potatoes or dumplings as well. And now we coming to the carbonate. That's a Czech burger. That's a version of the Czech burger, except Czechs don't eat usually. They like sandwiches, like we will talk very soon about. But if they eat something, it's not common to have things between two slices of bread. It's just more common to have a side and having on the plate. So that's one great example. This is a Dutch schnitzel. This is a different version of it, filled with a Gouda cheese. And now we're coming to close to the 90s, when this was in late 80s, most luxurious meal you can get in the restaurant. This is a chicken breast steak with brie cheese, which Czech has their version of hermelín, but that's very similar, with a peach on the top from the compote. And it sounds crazy, but it makes sense. But I still like that meal. It's kind of old school from my age, but I still enjoy it. And now we're coming to the modern one, Kuřená rozmarino, rosemary chicken. This is kind of pan-seared with mashed potato kisses, bacon wraps. So now we are in like 2000 era, and now this is what people love most if they like beer. By the way, Czech Republic, it's #1 country in the world in consumption of beer per capita. So Czechs drink actually more beer than all Americans. Czech have 10 million people, believe or not. And the reason for it, Czechs are not alcoholics, or obviously some of them maybe, but not by the nature. But when you go in Czech to the pub, the beer is cheaper than water. So you get, if a lot of people go to restaurants between their work. So in order to keep up with the family budget, they get a beer. So that's how it's happened. So this is a nice thing. And this is a perfect, most popular beer meal which you can have. Then we have herb crusted pork tenderloin, mashed potatoes, spinach sauce. That's one of the modern meals. And now we're coming to the street food. We have a fried cheese. Remember, it can be done with ham, and it's still considered a vegetarian meal. But most often it's not. It can be served with sides or in the bun. And now we're coming to the potato pancakes, just plain or with extra cheese, sour cream. And this is a langosh. That sounds, again, not very Czech if you are interested in languages. That's actually originated in Hungary. That's another thing. But in 50s, it gets to Czech Republic, became a street food, and it's pretty much fried bread with optional topping on the top, garlic and other stuff. And now we're coming to the dessert section. That was the hardest class which I ever taught when I decided in Czech Museum. This is a větrník. For those, most of you, or probably none of you ever heard about it, which is okay, but everyone heard about eclairs, right, at some point. So that's a patacho dough with a caramel whipped cream and special kind of pudding. And it's very elaborate, but it's very typical dessert for Czech cuisine. Same, like on totally opposite this required scale level, it's a milk rice, which actually can utilize leftover milk if you didn't season it. That's actually super simple recipe. Strudel, everyone heard at some point. Most people connect it to Vienna. The difference with Czech strudel and Vienna is that Czechs using croissant dough, which is a little different than the dough which using in Vienna. This is Armenian honey cake, which again Armenian, right? But in 50s it get to Czech Republic, and even if it originated in Armenia, it becomes it's a staple. If you go to the coffee house, that's what you get. Buchty. Buchty, I don't even know how to translate. Let's translate it filled collage or filled pastry, yeasty pastry. It's baked together, then you split to individual portion. And by the way, this was one of the meal which used to be on Fridays at school, and kids all totally love it because it was sweet, right? What kid doesn't want to eat sweet food? We actually have tradition in my home that almost every week we do one sweet dinner, and my little girls totally love it. And this is a babovka. This is a marble bundt cake, which is also traditional with that. And finally, we have a Christmas cookies. I actually gonna have I'm teaching that Zoom classes, so you guys can join me through the Czech Museum. I have people from all over US and Canada, and we will do quite a few kinds, but average household make at least 10 to 15 kinds. So there's a multiple, and they are very different. And some of them are very elaborate, some of them are simple, and then everything in between. And pancakes, we call that pancakes, but the best way to call it, it's a crepes, I guess, French crepes, but it's called palacinky in Czech, and it's pretty much very similar way. It can be just rolled with a marmalade or filled with fruit and powdered with cocoa powder or powdered sugar. And now we're coming to the main topic of our class today, session, let's call it session. So Jan Paukert, Lahůdkářství. What Jan Paukert is very important for our lesson because in 1826 he invented this traditional Czech open face sandwich. And there were versions before that, but he really defined the style. And what it became, it's a staple of Czech cuisine. You have also a mini version, which on the picture look almost same, but the small version is like 3 to 5 bites. The bigger version is like 10 bites. Oh, I skipped myself. So there is a big difference. And the bigger versions are used like a quick snack. Czech people like sandwiches, and Czech people also do what we do in America, that they put things in between the bread and eat it, but they still also enjoy when something it's just have its open face. And it doesn't have to be the decorative, but it's also could be very decorative and anything between. And people, if it's like the big one, it's like a to-go. It's like a very simple snack. You bring a box to work when you have a birthday. Same like people bring donuts here maybe. And if it's a smaller one, it's more like a fancier version of it, which is in more fancier events. And the smaller one, we are gonna taste today. So we will have the fancier version. I actually heard that even the smaller one are very filling, but you guys decide how you want to take it. What do you need for open face sandwich? Bread. Czechs have a special bread called veka. That's sometimes incorrectly called like a French baguette, but in a way, and I brought a sample, it's this kind of basic French bread which you can buy in multiple stores around the US, as far as I know. And you can have a version which are bigger, thinner, anything between, but it needs to be any bread which has a fat content. Then there is a special spread. We can have another hour-long session about spreads. So I will just tell you a couple interesting things. The number one, which it's in most sandwiches, it's a vlašský salad, which is sometimes people confuse it with pea salad or potato salad, but it's pretty much a little bit of everything. And there is onion present, of course, and it's a mayonnaise and a little bit of vinegar, and it's all coming greatly together. Again, recipes on my blog, if anyone is interested. Then we have also the cheese garlic spread, which is on the one of the sandwiches too. And then finally, we have some deli meat and cheeses. And deli meat and cheeses you can buy everywhere. But what's typical for Czech sandwiches is this boiled ham. It could be, you can, like everything else, you can buy the premium quality boiled ham, you can buy the bad quality, anything between. But in Europe, it's very common. And here in at least here, it's in Cedar Rapids where I live, when I go to store, they don't even sell it because they said it's a bad quality. And I said, no, it's not. And I know the manufacturer, but they said it doesn't have any smoky flavor or any herbs. I said, that's okay. That's okay. The quality, it's about other things. And then cheeses. There are multiple different cheeses in Czech, but what I use here, it's a baby cheese, a baby Swiss, or provolone. And then, of course, pepperoni, salami. And then we have extra stuff like hard-boiled eggs, olive, red peppers, you name it. And we will start right now very soon. I will show you how to make few, and guys told me that they will be able to put camera, so you should see me on the screen. But before we do it, this the open face sandwiches are done in multiple levels. People do it at home, people do it for living, and anything between. And this is a version of how it looks when you just put stuff on the top. So if you like cooking, you are welcome to join my blog and see how to do it, and you don't need to have a fanciest attempt at first, but this is a one simpler way. Then this is when you kind of learn to do certain shapes, certain twists, and then you finally get when you get some kind of finesse and get into it. We will. This is a ham sandwich, which would be still vegetarian in Czech. This is a cheese sandwich, which there is literally no meat. And this is a Russian egg. I have a funny story, but I will leave it for the end about Russian egg to make sure we stay in the time frame. And then there is a special. It's special because it has a little bit of everything. And that's it. So I will ask gentlemen upstairs or above me how if they can just switch to the camera so you guys see actually what I'm doing here. And pretty much talking about this basic level open face sandwiches. There is no rocket science. You just follow the spreads, you cut the bread, and you just pile it how it makes sense. Sometimes you didn't see it on my picture. People even, yeah, that would work. People even use grated cheese to sprinkle it on the top. So you can really use your creativity and you don't need to be hard on yourself. What I will show you is how to cut bread first. Obviously, if you have skinnier bread, you have to cut it under angle. And to get nice size. How big you cut it, it's totally up to you. But if you just cut it straight, it will be like round circles and you will be not able to do the nice sandwich. This is kind of a key which people ask me a lot. So I will work on the bigger sandwiches. I will make sure, yes, that's perfect. So first, general layer of the spread. If you don't want to do spread, sometimes people just use plain mayonnaise or cream cheese even, so you don't really need to make it elaborate. You can make it very simple. But obviously these spreads are delicious. And if you have the time and if you're in mood, that's the best way to go. And I just put a couple scoops on the top and then I distribute it with a spoon. Very simple task. And now we will do the ham sandwich. And I take one slice of ham. And this is what I didn't mention yet, and it's super important. When you go to the delis in the United States or supermarket which sell deli products, the meat is often very thick and cheese, and it's not flexible. So we need to have it often specially sliced. Sometimes people use here the term shaved ham or something, but be careful, don't, if you will go for it, make sure they don't shave it too skinny. It needs to still hold together. And when they cut it for you, they need to nicely pile it, which some people with a temper don't enjoy to do in deli counters. But if you convince them, it's worth it. And then you have a multiple cooking technique. Some of them takes time. I saw people learn that quickly. Some people took a lot more time, but you just simply flip it over the fingers and then roll it. And once you roll it, you open it. So what you create is this kind of a rosy cone. And you can just simply do much simpler stuff too. If that's more complicated for you, you just simply flip it to half. I did it wrong, that part. So let me try again. and then you roll it like a cone. Literally like you would do the piece of paper. You can even practice with a paper. So it's really the way how you do it. But what I did is the same thing, but except I unflip it. And to reinforce the ham and make it more cohesive, you can take pepperoni and put it right in. And then egg. Hard-boiled egg, it's very common in open-faced sandwiches. And we can put just a slice of the egg. And then to make it super meaty, maybe that would actually qualify it like not a vegetarian anymore. It's you just do another cone. I will do it a couple more times. Let me show you. So you flip it over the front finger like that. And then you roll over, and you can just roll to simple cone. You can even roll to simple cone on the cutting board. You don't need to do it in the air. But if you do it my way, you can start actually unflipping the ham. So you kind of open this corner. So you can create this kind of rosy effect. And pepperoni, I do the same thing. So flip it to half, roll it, and once I roll it, I open it. And I just put it right there. And now let me do the cheese sandwich. I have here paprika. That's a very simple trick, which you can use. I will do same shape and roll it over and dip it here. And then there is one thing which I want to mention. If somebody watching me and thinking he doesn't have a gloves. I had 100% time of the gloves when I prepared that, but this is my lunch. So I will touch it with my hand. And the reason is for that in Czech, it's legal if chef has a super clean hand to don't use gloves. Obviously, you need to have everything. You have to have commercial kitchen and everything. I heard in some sushi places around the US, it's allowed too, but I respect the rules which are here. So all the sandwiches were done without touch of my hand, but this one's not, so don't eat them. Okay, and then we take a provolone, flip it over the fingers, and put it across. And then we will take a pickle, specially sliced pickle, to create this opening, and it will nicely tie it together. We can put also olive there. Olive's not growing in Czech, but it's common. And the pickle is actually fun to make. I will show you very quickly how you cut the pickle. I hope the camera did justice to it. But you take a smallest pickle you find. It needs to be dill pickle. Cut it diagonally so you have thicker end and skinnier end, and it's going down. Then you take a paring knife and cut it 1, 2, 3, even 4 if you can handle it, but 3 is enough, through the thicker part, and then you open it like that. And it creates a nice shape. All these techniques, in a way, are used in the Czech charcuteries when you have a platter. So all these roses and other stuff, it can be very decorative if somebody has a patience to do so. And then we have here a little bit of mayonnaise, not to over mayonnaise it, but just a little bit of touch. And finally, bring some freshness, parsley. Parsley is very popular in Czech, and it's transitioned to this as well. And here we have 2 large sandwiches. And I will do that. We have about 3 minutes, right, Chet? So I will do the Russian egg sandwich, and I will do it because it's very weird in a good way. And there is a funny story to it, and it's delicious, by the way, if you like hard-boiled eggs. So during the communism, as you can imagine, everything Russian was the best, and Russia was in charge since '68. So in early 70s, there used to be the huge hotel in Prague, and there was a food and beverage manager. And food and beverage manager make a mistake because you order too much eggs, too much ham, and it started rotting and being expired and over. And if back then, like a communist manager, you make this mistake, that would be considered crime, because it would be considered like wasting of communist property, because everything was owned by the country. So he would be fired and potentially even had to deal with a court. So he decided that he created a super interesting way. He created a sandwich which covered the mistakes and covered the spoilage of the food, and he served it. But he had one more issue back then. Now it's simple. Chefs create meal, next day put it on the Facebook, and it starts selling. Back then the meals needs to be approved, and it took sometimes years. So how he get it approved? He called it Russian, because if you call it Russian when Russia is in charge, it's gonna fly with that. So this is not, I know the situation with Russia, it's difficult now, but this is not really Russian. It was just called by that. And it became, the guy was very lucky. It became super popular and it was everywhere. And how he did it? He take the ham. I don't know how he really hide that ham. I read it was in pretty bad shape. I mean, in a way, danger. But he did it back then. Like back then it was go to prison and lose a job and don't have anything, or just give it a shot, right? What can happen? So he created a sandwich. He just created ham and cheese, as we saw. And then he had this bunch of eggs, which were in pretty bad shape, and he needed to use them all. So one slice of egg wouldn't do it, right? So he used half of the egg. And how to cover it? He can create so-called, again, genius, Russian sauce. It sounds, again, Russian, but it's a combination of mayonnaise and water from the dill pickle, I mean liquid from the dill pickle, and he just mixed it together. And it's nicely coated the eggs. And to really make sure that nobody will find that anything is wrong, he take the pimento peppers or any roasted peppers he has available, put it on the side. That gives actually nice flavor element. And finally, he used that pickle as we sliced. And he put a generous sauce, generous amount portion of the mayonnaise, and a little bit of parsley. And he didn't just solve the problem, but he created something which it's still important part of the Czech open face sandwiches. And if you do it with a not spoiled ingredients, it's very delicious. So this was the Czech creativity, how to don't get in trouble with Russians. So this is about our demonstration. We can go on and on, but now the important part, which should be included anything food related, it's taste mini sandwiches. We have 3 kinds. I wanted before we go for it, and we can also ask, we can do Q&A chat, right? First, maybe. Yeah. Yes. I didn't realize. I apologize. So before we start asking and answering question, and you guys start going for sandwiches, we have 3 kinds. We have the ham mini sandwich with egg. Then we have a cheese one, which is 0% of meat, didn't come to meat, and it's delicious. But if you don't like meat, you would like it. And there is one with pepperoni, which using a different cheese garlic spread. And now I am ready for questions, and you guys can go for your mini sandwich of your choice. And whatever you wanna, in whatever order you wanna do it, that's fine. Okay. That's the good question. You can use, it's pretty much needs to be lighter bread with a fat content. That's what matters most. It cannot use any whole grain flour, but in general, I would use the soft wheat, yeah, if I bake it. But I usually don't. That's one of these things which people just buy and bother about all these spreads and extra stuff which take time. Yes? Yes, yeah, you can use any kind. That's one thing. I use what I think it's best, but you can use any kind of salami, ham, or cheeses. And yes, Czech people love deli meat and all kind of cheeses sliced. So yes, that's very common. They didn't really count that. We call that, in terms of pepperoni, we call that paprikový salám, which literally means paprika salami in translation, but it's the same thing. But there is pepperoni coming from Italy and other stuff. The version which we have here, it's slightly different, but we have to experiment a little.
What's the other? You have two sauces up here. One was a potato.
It has little bit potatoes. I call that Vlašský salad or signature spread. That's most common. But the other one is cheese garlic, which is a shredded cheese with little bit mayonnaise, yogurt, and garlic in. And it's very delicious with meat, but also just like a one-biters. If you ladies enjoy wine, you can just make this spread because it's combining few things. It's easiest things in the world. Let it sit for a few hours in the fridge and then put it like on little pieces of bread, and it's absolutely delicious. And it's commonly eaten in the wine cellars in Czech Republic too. So it makes sense, and it's one of these 5 minutes projects, I promise. And one interesting thing, what I didn't mention in presentation, these sandwiches are, as far as I know, not sold in the United States anywhere. So you have to make them or try them today or on Friday, right? Thursday, right? Tomorrow. Time's flying, tomorrow. And we will have all the kinds. So if you like it, you can go ahead and come again. Yes? So we call it Chlebíčky. That's a great question. Chlebíčky. And Chlebíček literally means, in direct translation, a little bread. So Chlebíčky, it's plural, and Chlebíček, it's a singular one. If there are no questions, I will tell one interesting thing. Sometimes people ask me how you eat them. So normally you hold sandwich like that, right? If you eat it with hands, this you kind of hold it this way. So you have to hold it, and if it's too big, you can squeeze it with a finger, the toppings, but that's the way how you eat it. It's a little tricky, but it's just a matter of getting used to it. It's normally served, the small one, even on the theater breaks and in galas and very formal occasion. So this is just about develop a style, and maybe first one of yours will be a little clumsy feeling to eat, but it's not impossible. Any other question? Yes? No book, but I have a cooking blog, and it's simple, cookingwithfamily.com. Yeah. Yes, yes. You can find it all there. Even for the meals which we talking before, you can find recipes if you want to do dumpling and all the herby things. So yes, if nobody has question, yes. Anyone has last question? I don't want to. Okay, I think we are set.